when you're using server-side rendering, most of the work is done by the server, which is good because it's good for performance, and it means that most of the content is in the HTML page, or at least is likely to be in the HTML page, because of course the HTML document can also contain JavaScript, of course. But usually if you're using such a technology,
You're listening to episode number 26 of 20-Minute JavaScript, where we discuss everything JavaScript related with members from the community. As you probably know by now, this episode is hosted by OpenReplay. It's an open source session replay platform for developers. If you'd like to know more, just visit openreplay.com. I'm Fernando, your developer turned podcast host, and today I'm going to be interviewing Antonello Zanini. He's a software developer and technical writer. We're going to be discussing JavaScript for SEO, essentially how you can use JavaScript to influence your SEO in a positive way. So welcome to the show, Antonello. Thank you for being here, and please introduce yourself to our audience.
first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope listeners will find this podcast interesting and actually useful. I'm Antonello Zanini. I'm a freelance software engineer and freelance technical writer. In detail, I'm a full stack web developer, but I also write technical content for companies from all over the world, especially in English, but sometimes also in Spanish and in Italian.
All right. Awesome. Yes. Thank you for coming and discussing the topic that we're going to be talking about, because it's definitely, I myself hope as well that people find it useful, because it's not a topic that is covered a lot. That is JavaScript for SEO. So we're going to be talking about how to influence or how to affect SEO for our sites and our applications online through JavaScript, or what to do and what not to do, essentially. So let's go to the basics. I always like to start at the most basic question, and that is, considering that SEO is search engine optimization, and that when a search engine, say Google, finds our site, crawls it, essentially goes through it, the code, and picks up the URLs and kind of the content and indexes that content. Where does JavaScript fit into all that process, essentially?
Well, if you want to optimize SEO for a web page, you have to consider all the elements that web page consists of. And JavaScript is part of that, or at least it's likely to be used by that web page. And JavaScript can be used, for example, to retrieve data or to implement front-end logic. So JavaScript plays a key role when it comes to performance, user interaction, user experience, and all these are parameters that Google uses to give your website a rank when it comes to SEO. So JavaScript is very important when it comes to SEO. And well, so yeah, you have to consider also JavaScript if you want to improve the performance, the SEO performance of your website.
All right, fair enough. And just as a note for listeners, we're going to be talking about SEO in as generically as possible, but when we can't, we're going to go to Google, because it's probably it is the biggest search engine around, and is probably the one that is sharing the most information about how they do indexing and how they do crawling, and they share a lot of information. So each search engine, there is no standard secret sauce. Each company has their own, and there is not even, I think the PageRank algorithm is not even public. So we're going from what experts have found out through researching and through experimentation, and through what little the companies have shared so far. But again, Google is the one that shares the most information, so we're trying to be generic, but when we can't, we'll go with Google. Hopefully, it'll still be 90% accurate anyway. So that said, That's a great point. So JavaScript is part of the web experience. It's part of
Yeah.
your website. So therefore, it is useful and it is relevant when it comes to SEO. I don't know if it was relevant when Google started, because I don't think they were parsing JavaScript on the front end and using like a headless browser to index and to crawl your site. That said, given the evolution that crawling and indexing and the whole thing, even front end development have had over the last few years, there are a lot of misconceptions. There are a lot of myths around what's useful and what's hurting your SEO when it comes to JavaScript. So can you share some of the most common myths that some developers believe to be true and that are actually or potentially hurting their SEO because they're either doing it or not doing it because they think it's correct?
Yeah. First, it's what you told. It's that Google in the past used to not to render JavaScript. It used to ignore JavaScript because it used to download the HTML document, and that's it. That's what Google was doing. But right now, it's no longer the case. Google actually use headless browsers to render your page, so JavaScript is part of the process. So many developers still think that JavaScript is not taken into consideration when it comes to SEO, but this is not true. So you have to consider JavaScript, and also most developers are now using JavaScript for developing single page applications, and single page applications are not good for SEO, but because their goal is not SEO, so they may think that JavaScript itself is not good, because most technologies that are used to develop single page applications are based on JavaScript. For example, React, let's say, and so they may think, well, React is not good for SEO if you are developing actually a single page application. So JavaScript is not good, but that's not the case. It's just the tool, but you can judge the language because of one tool or because of the goal of one tool.
So that's a very fair point. Just because you're using it for non-SEO friendly, let's put it that way,
Yeah.
activity doesn't mean that the whole tool doesn't help you if you want to use it for SEO. So absolutely, JavaScript, one of the biggest myths is that JavaScript hurts your SEO, and that is not true. So, and hopefully after listening to this episode, people will understand why that is. So when it comes to indexing, when it comes to crawling or going through your site, let's put it that way, there are multiple steps that search engines go through. Crawling is one of them, processing and rendering is another one, indexing is another one. Knowing how the search engine goes through your site, how is JavaScript affecting that behavior?
Okay, first, Google performs a first crawl where it only downloads the HTML document of a web page. So in this case, JavaScript is not taken into consideration and is not important. But what's new, or at least what has been new for a few years now, is that JavaScript is now used by Google to render the page. So Google performs a second crawl where it actually renders JavaScript and it executes your web page in a browser. And here is also where Google gives your web page a value when it comes to SEO. So this is very important. And so JavaScript is part of the process, of the crawling process, and then Google decide if it should index your page or not. And so if in the second crawl, if your website, let's say that it is slow because of JavaScript, or it is slow because it has to load a lot of data with JavaScript, or it is slow because, for example, the JavaScript bundle is too large because the browser has to download too much content. In that case, you will receive a bad evaluation, and that's not good. So, and also, for example, let's say that JavaScript is affecting the time to interact on the page. This is a parameter that Google uses to evaluate your website. So JavaScript plays a key role, and you have to optimize it, because it is part of the process. Or at least if we are talking about Google, because not all search engines have like a second crawl, but Google has, and Google is the most important one. So I think that that optimizing JavaScript is very important.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into that in a minute as well. But yeah, that second phase of processing that Google added, that's key, essentially, like you said, because that's where JavaScript gets into play, and then that's where whatever you did to optimize it either works or hurts your SEO. But absolutely. And there are a lot of factors that Google takes into account to rank your site. So it's not just a few based on JavaScript, but definitely it will help if you do it right. You can't just write your JavaScript for the user. You also have to consider the Google bot, essentially. And one of the concepts I came across when researching this and when understanding the process that could also be affected by JavaScript is the crawling budget. So can you kind of elaborate what the crawling budget is and how can we affect it either positively or negatively through JavaScript?
Crawl budget is like, we can define crawling budget as the maximum number of pages that a search engine wants to crawl. So how can a search engine define this parameter? Well, it uses the performance of your website. So let's say that your website is very slow. In that case, the search engine is less likely to crawl it, because the search engine doesn't want to waste a lot of resources to wait for your website to load. That's not something fair if you think about it. Or let's say that your website has a lot of pages that are very large. In that case, let's talk about Google. Google has to download them, and it takes time and it takes resources, and they don't want to waste resources. So the better the performance of your website, the more Google is willing to crawl it. And again, considering that JavaScript directly affects the performance of your website, that's also why it is so important to optimize it, because if you don't optimize it, you may end up with Google not rendering, not crawling all your pages, and that's not good.
Exactly. And just to give context to our audience, contrary to popular belief, Google doesn't index the whole internet. That's impossible. So they have a very limited time to spend indexing content. So they created this concept of crawling budget that, like you said, is kind of relates to the number of pages, because they know that they have allotted time to go through it. So if you're fast, then they'll go through more pages. But if you waste their time, like you said, loading content or doing unnecessary things or unoptimized things with JavaScript, then your site's going to be slower. So they're going to be spending more time in a single page, and thus they're going to say, well, this is just not worth my time. Yeah, it's something to consider. A lot of things hurt the budget. It's not just a single problem that you may have. It might even be you making a lot of parallel requests. So, remember that every time you do a request somewhere else, they catch the URL as well, and they want to try to index it as well. So it's gonna be a problem if you don't take that into account. Now, JavaScript is used in many websites to load dynamic data. What could we be doing right now on our sites, on our websites, that could be hindering the SEO. We've already kind of covered, a few things. If you're hurting the crawling budget, then you're affecting your SEO. But what are the other things that you could be doing with JavaScript that could be affecting your SEO? What are the other don'ts?
Well, as we discussed in the past, this was not a problem because Google could not execute JavaScript and therefore could not, for example, perform AJAX calls and retrieve data dynamically. So in the past, this was not a problem in the meaning that it wasn't even taken into consideration. Right now, it is a problem. You have to find a solution to a way to optimize your dynamic calls. And for example, let's say that you are retrieving a lot of data through Ajax and you're building the DOM because of that. In that case, your DOM may change a lot from the first crawl to the second crawl. This is not good, especially if these calls take a lot of time, because again, it's a performance problem. And also, if you are building links with this data, this is not good because links should be in the HTML content, because links should be, let's say, static, should be embedded in the HTML content, because you want your links to be authoritative and you don't want your links to change a lot over time, because this is not good for Google or for any search engine. So yeah, if you're retrieving a lot of data dynamically and building your web page with that, and your HTML document doesn't contain so much content, this is not good for SEO, because especially in the first crawl, it makes Google's work very, very difficult.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned links as well. So another thing that we might not take into account is, because essentially for the browser it works, when you don't use an anchor tag for links, instead you use like a span element and then set the on-click element with your JavaScript routing code, so it will work for, because you want to style it whatever, or you want to make it look fancier. That will work for the browser, but Google will not understand it as a link, so it will not crawl your site correctly as well. Yeah, so that's also a big no-no. On the opposite side, what are some of the best practices? What are the things that we do want to be doing with our JavaScript to improve the SEO?
First of all, you have to minimize JavaScript files. That's basic advice, but many websites don't do that, because if you're minimizing your JavaScript files, you are reducing their size, and also you are spending your users are spending less time downloading your web pages, and also Google. So that's good. And also you should remove JavaScript dependencies to the bare minimum, because this is very common. There are so many JavaScript libraries that you may end up using libraries for like basic things, and you can avoid that. Or maybe you are importing a library and you are using it, but this library depends on so many libraries, because let's say that it offers a lot of features, but you are only using one of these features. So you should look for another like library, or you should optimize the way your build bundle is built actually. And also you should use Ajax to dynamically retrieve data only when it is really required, because you may end up performing so many Ajax calls, but I mean, sometimes it's not necessary. Also because, as we said, the content should be in the HTML pages, or at least most content should be in the HTML documents. So yeah, of course, Ajax is a very good technology, but you should not rely solely on that.
All right. And to your point of having the content already on the HTML whenever possible, can you go into a little bit of detail on like techniques like server-side rendering or hybrid rendering, and how are they affecting the SEO when it comes to Google going through our site and indexing it?
When you're using server-side rendering, most of the work is done by the server, which is good because it's good for performance, and it means that most of the content is in the HTML page, or at least is likely to be in the HTML page, because of course the HTML document can also contain JavaScript, of course. But usually if you're using such a technology, it's because you want the content to be retrieved by the server, to be embedded in the HTML document, so that the client, when it downloads the web page, the web page, the HTML document already comes with a lot of content, and that's very good. Also because it usually it reduces the importance of JavaScript frontend in the meaning that you are more likely to retrieve data on the backend and not on the front end. So this may be good, especially if your Ajax call are very heavy, are very slow. While hybrid regeneration is a concept, like an advanced concept, where a website is statically generated by the server, but the content may change over time. So what happens is that the server can actually regenerate a page. Let's say that a user hits a page after a certain amount of time. It was like generated the first time. The server can actually regenerate that page, update that page, and so you don't have like all the time the most updated version of a web page. But on the other hand, it's good because if you use server-side rendering, your server is working a lot, because every time a request comes, it has to generate a web page. It has to do some work. But in this case, it is not true. In this case, it already has all the pages statically generated, and if the content changing or like a certain amount of time has passed, then it automatically regenerates that page. So you can think about that as a sort of caching system, and this is very good for performance because you are reducing the time required by the server to produce the HTML page, and also like the time that Googlebot used to has to wait to retrieve your page.
All right, perfect. And definitely then those techniques should be considered then if you're building a somewhat big site, essentially. If you're like building a landing page, it doesn't matter. But if you're building something that if you want Google to crawl and rank it high, then you have to consider every bit of optimization. And in that regard, you're not going to be doing server-side rendering or even hybrid rendering manually, because I'm guessing, I've never done it myself, but I'm guessing it takes quite a bit of time and work. So most of frameworks right now, I'm talking Next, I'm talking Remix, all of them have some kind of solution to this problem. So what are the best or like top 5 or top 3 frameworks around that would help us the best to optimize the way we serve content to Googlebot and to the users in a way that we can optimize it for SEO?
As you told, there are several frameworks and technologies. For example, Next, Gatsby, Angular Universal, Remix. There are several technologies, but in my experience and in my opinion, the best one, if I had to choose one, I would go for Next.js, because it comes with so many features, like out of the box. You don't have to do a lot of work to make Next work. But on the other hand, it is also true that Next.js is easy to deploy on Vercel, which is the platform supported by Next.js. But if you're using Next.js on another platform, you may have to define some scripts to make it work, especially if you're using like advanced features. So sometimes it's not that easy, but at the same time, the tech that it allows you to customize the framework is very good, because yeah, of course, if you don't have time, you go on Vercel and that's it. But if you have time, or for example, if you have to deploy a website on not on Vercel because of some agreements with your clients, uh, you actually can, and it's good, and you can optimize it. It's a very very good tool in my opinion, and yeah, I've used it for years now, and I think that it's the best technology on the market right now.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the top ones if you start researching, if you start looking around. The new guys like Remix or even Fresh for Dino, they're trying to make a dent on the empire. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
That Next has built, but it's gonna take a while before someone can take the whole place that Next is
yeah, of
taking.
course.
All right. So last question will be: now that we understand how are we affecting our SEO through JavaScript, now that we know what are some of the best practices and kind of what frameworks should we be looking at and which ones we shouldn't, what tools are there out there that we can use to understand if our SEO is right, or if we're like have a huge hole in our SEO strategy and we didn't even know about it?
I mean, there are several tools, especially paid tools, but I'm going to say a tool that is free, and I'm talking about Google Lighthouse. Google Lighthouse is a tool that comes with your browser. If you're using Google Chrome, you simply have to click, like right click, inspect, and you can reach Google Lighthouse. Google Lighthouse is a tool that uh, analyze analyzes your website and gives you an idea on how it is performing when it comes to core vitals. Core vitals are new parameters that Google are using to evaluate technical SEO of a website. So, but also it also gives you a lot of feedback on how to improve that. It provides you with link. For example, if you're using a Next.js website, let's say, and it's not good when it comes to images. Images are very large. Google Lighthouse is going to tell you, well, based on what we understood, you're using Next.js, and Next.js comes with features to optimize images, and it gives you a link to the Next.js documentation, for example. This is very good. And I mean, sometimes it only gives you a very generic message, but most of the time it's a very good tool if you want to optimize core vitals, which are now the most important things when it comes to technical SEO. So, and again, there are several other tools, but if we want to talk about only free tools, I would say Google Lighthouse.
All right. I mean, we don't have to talk about just free tools. If you have like a paid recommendation, just go ahead and do it as well.
Yeah, actually, I collaborated with SEO Tester Online, and I think it's a great tool. But yeah, let's say that if I had to optimize a website only for technical SEO, I would go for Google Lighthouse, especially if we are talking about JavaScript optimization. But if we are talking about optimizing a website for SEO, like generally speaking, then I would also use a paid tool such as SEO Tester Online, for example. But again, they have two different goals, I think, or at least I'm more likely to rely on Google Lighthouse because it is developed by Google.
That's
That's
true.
why.
That's true. They know what they want. So they'll
Yeah.
be the first ones to tell you if you're doing it wrong. Absolutely. And who doesn't have Chrome on their system if they're doing web development? So
Yeah.
it's already there. Just use it. All right. Antonello, that's it for my questions about SEO. Thank you again. This was a very interesting
Thank you.
overview of a topic. So now I want to go into the next section of the episode, the quick round questions. I have 3 for every guest. So the first one is, what is the best advice you ever received?
Well, let me think, but yeah, I think it's like take a walk. That's basic advice, but if you have a problem you don't know how to address or how to solve, just take a walk. Stop thinking about that. Take a walk, take your time, and you will actually find a solution. That's the best advice I I received and I can give to new developers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just think about something else, and the
Yeah.
problem will still, in the back of your head, it'll still be
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
working itself out. Absolutely. Yeah. So, second question, what's the most exciting project you ever worked on?
Okay, this is easy. It's calcio.com. Calcio in Italian means football, and football is very important in Italy. And calcio.com is one of the largest websites when it comes to football. It has more than 4 million of pages,
Well,
and I had to design the technical architecture, and it was very challenging because it's very large, and we also you have to be fast because it's a website designed for SEO, and we used Next.js. Actually, we tried several technologies, and we decided to go for Next.js because of the documentation. And also the problem was that we had to deploy it on AWS, and especially on Elastic Beanstalk, and it's not that easy to configure Next.js on Elastic Beanstalk. I also wrote a lot of articles about that, but yeah, it's been very challenging. But right now, it's performing like very very well. So I think that this I learned a lot through this project.
awesome. All right. Yeah. And, after you go through that whole process and the site works and it performs correctly, it's such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can relate. Final question. What is one thing you wish you knew when you started coding that you picked up over the years?
Okay, I think it's that you don't have to be an expert to start helping others. Because when I started, I thought that I had to become like an expert. I had to have like, let's say, 5 years of experience to start helping others with technical content or with podcasts or whatever. But right now, I think that no, you can simply like it's more important to be able to convey a message, to learn how to convey a message. If you do your homework, if you study a technology, you can actually provide helps to the others. You don't have to be an expert, or at least you don't have to know it all. You can know like a small portion of a framework, and you can start writing on that. You can start helping others, and you can start also uh, like listening to others about that. This is very important in my experience if you want to become a better coder, a better programmer, because you have to keep yourself like up to date, and you also have in my opinion to help others, because it's not that easy. If you find out how to solve a problem, you should, in my opinion, tell the others how to do it.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that you said a couple of key things here. That is that you have to do your research. That's
Yeah.
first. You don't have to spend 5 years or 10 years
No.
working on the industry to help, but you do have to do the research
Yeah, yeah,
before you
of
try to
course.
to help it. But that's also why it's so important, because if you want to help someone, I don't know, building Next.js sites, you have to fully understand it so that you can then explain it to others in simpler terms. That's the way you understand the topic, so that then you can explain it easily. And that process, in that process, you think you're just helping them, but you're also helping yourself. You're
Yeah,
learning quite
of
a lot.
course.
So yeah, it's a must do practice for all developers, in my opinion. Everyone should be either writing or sharing knowledge somehow
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
through some of the medium out there, because it helps everyone, not just other people, but also themselves. Absolutely, 100% agree with you. All right, so now we're done. The episode's finished. Thank you so much. Antonello, can you please tell our audience where they can find you if they want to reach out, if they want to ask you questions about SEO or any other topic?
They can find me on antonellozanini.com, but also on Medium, because I'm active mainly on Medium, antozanini.medium.com. I have written a lot of technical articles, so if you want to read some of my articles, you can find them on Medium. And also, if you want to reach out to me, simply look for me on LinkedIn, Antonello Zanini on LinkedIn, and I always try to respond to every message and to provide help. So if you want to text me, simply go on LinkedIn or on my email. You will find on my website.
Perfect. All right. Thank you again, Antonello, for sharing your experience with SEO. I hope people found it useful, and that's it. Everyone else listening, thank you for listening, and catch you on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.